The Thin Man was one of the most popular movies of 1934, and that's pretty goddamn impressive when you consider 34 also saw the release of It Happened One Night, Death Takes a Holiday, Of Human Bondage, Tarzan and His Mate, The Scarlet Empress, and back-to-back Cecil B. DeMille epics Four Frightened People and Cleopatra. It was an out-of-nowhere mega hit that turned its lead actors into superstars, launched one of the most successful franchises of the early sound era, inspired legions of imitators over decades, and remains one of the most beloved and influential films in both the screwball comedy and mystery/detective genres. And unpacking exactly why that was, other than it's a pretty damn good little movie.
Say, I'm getting out of here.
No, you stay here.
If I stay, I know I'm going to take a poke at him.
Then I insist that you stay.
Is actually a little bit more complicated than the mystery that makes up the central plot, or at least is supposed to make up the central plot, so it's probably best to start at the beginning. Actually, it's best if you just watch the movie first. So if you're watching this without having seen The Thin Man yourself and you get any inkling that you might enjoy it, please pause the episode and go watch The Thin Man. It's like 93 minutes long. It's an incredibly popular and widely distributed film. It's probably not hard to find. Okay? Because that's your spoiler warning. Okay. So The Thin Man is a somewhat loose adaptation of a detective novel by legendary crime fiction author Dashiell Hammett, and if you know your Hammett, you know what you're in for, at least initially. A sordid crime, with lots of suspects, even more characters, and a twisty web of lies and deceit crisscrossing stratas of class and culture in a big city setting, and when I said there were lots of characters, I was not messing around. Deep breath. The story is that there's this inventor named Wynant who's about to leave his New York-based office workshop for an important and top-secret project when his daughter shows up to announce she's become engaged to marry her boyfriend Tommy a few days after the upcoming Christmas holiday. Dorothy and Tommy are our nice, quintessential, innocent, but not that bright good kid couple, and this is a detective story, so you are correct in assuming that they're kinda screwed and it's not really about them anyway.
Has he seen the whole family?
Yes, and he still wants to marry me.
He's a brave man.
Yes.
Say, why did your mother divorce him? I think he's swell.
Well, it seems he has a secretary.
Oh, well, I'll do my own typing.
Oh, and Wynant is divorced from Dorothy's mother, Mimi, partly because she's a terrible person, but also because he was having an affair with his sexy downtown secretary, Julia. After promising that he'll make it back for the wedding, Wynant leaves his affairs in the hands of his lawyer, Macaulay, but is angered to discover that $50,000, or a lot of money in 1934 dollars in government bonds he wants to give to Dorothy as a wedding gift has gone missing from the office safe, and he deduces correctly that it was stolen by Julia, who is also two-timing him with at least two other local criminals, one of whom she's already split the money with, and whom Wynant admonishes her to get it back from, or else.
What are you going to do?
But then as Christmas gets a little closer and no one hears from Wynant again, those who'd like to hear from Wynant again start to get worried about him. Dorothy is concerned about her father in general, but her mother and creepy brother are mostly concerned that their main source of income is going to dry up.
You just want money, and you haven't any right to anymore. He made a big settlement on you. Ah, that's gone long ago. I've got to find him. Where is he?
You know, you have an Oedipus complex and you won't admit it.
Oh, please, Gilbert.
The trouble with you is you won't face facts. Now, I know I have a mother fixation, but it's slight. It hasn't yet reached the point of where...
Stop it, Gilbert. Stop it.
Oh, and so is Mom's jobless, low-life boyfriend, Chris, who's also on hand. Oh, and Julia's other boy toy is this guy named Nunheim, who's got a wife and is a stool pigeon for the police, but what's mainly important is that when Mimi finally decides to go and ask Dad's mistress where he might have gone, Julia has been murdered, and a key piece of evidence that Dorothy immediately conceals from the cops suggests that Wynant himself, now referred to by police as an enigmatic suspect known as the Thin Man of the title, was the killer. Yep, this is a Dashiell Hammett story alright, but here's the thing. The Thin Man isn't actually about who killed Julia, where the Thin Man is, or really any of the players in the main, very serious murder mystery plot. The Thin Man is about these two people.
I'm taking him, he's taking me. Oh!
Are you hurt, madam?
Madam.
Oh, women and children first, boys.
Say, what is the score anyway?
Oh, so it's you he was after.
Hello, sugar.
Oh, I'm a hero. I was shot twice in the Tribune.
I read where you were shot 5 times in the tabloids.
It's not true. He didn't come anywhere near my tabloids.
We're all like that on my father's side.
By the way, how is your father's side?
Oh, it's much better, thanks. And yours?
Meet William Powell and Myrna Loy as Nick and Nora Charles. He's a retired detective who enjoys drinking, partying, shopping, hanging out with his dog, and spending his wife's basically limitless cash supply. She's an ultra-wealthy socialite heiress with an inherited fortune of unfathomable scale who also enjoys drinking, partying, shopping, hanging out with her dog, and the creative ways Nick finds to spend her basically limitless cash supply. They're in town for the holidays because New York for New Year's sounded like a thing to do, and they get pulled into helping solve the big mystery because Dorothy remembers Nick as a friend of her father's back from when he was a gumshoe, and solving a murder also seems like a thing to do. Yes, really, these are the good guys, a pair of glib, carefree, cocktail-pounding, insanely wealthy dilettantes who show up about midway into Act 1 and eventually decide to solve the case pretty much because when you're too rich to have any actual responsibilities but can only drink so much in a given day, you've got to fill the remaining hours with something. Our heroes.
I'll bet you dollars to dog biscuits that they never thought of. I don't want to hear anything about it.
Is that my drink over there?
What are you drinking?
Rye.
Yes, that's yours.
What hit me?
The last martini.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Sure, the mystery stuff is solid, and it's fun seeing then current and future matinee mainstays like Marino Sullivan and Cesar Romero in the straight roles, but the reason this was a box office smash that spawned 5 more movies was that the audience had just never seen an on-screen duo like Nick and Nora, and they just could not get enough of them. And it's easy to see why. They're an infectious pair, realized through crackling dialogue and brought to life thanks to chemistry that simply defies description from Powell and Loy. You just have to see it to believe it.
My soul, woman, I give you 3 murders and you're still not satisfied. Oh. Well, if you insist.
Well, I don't insist.
I gotta talk to you. I want you to tell me something. I want you to give it to me straight. Get me?
Hey, would you mind putting that gun away? My wife doesn't care, but I'm a very timid fellow.
You idiot.
Madam, I'm afraid we shall take the dog out.
Oh, it's all right, Joe. It's all right. It's my dog. And, my wife.
Well, you might have mentioned me first on the billing.
The dog's well-trained. He'll behave himself.
It might.
Plus, even apart from the performances, the characterizations are fascinating. Sharp-witted interplay between couples is almost always grounded in some level of resentment or antagonism, but Nick and Nora's dynamic is all about how over-the-top in love they are. These are two people completely infatuated with each other on multiple levels, clearly. It's romantic and genuine, but the surface level and visceral business is equally potent. Nick is deeply in love with his wife, and he really, really loves being effectively the trophy husband of a literal American princess. One of the rare depictions in fiction of a male character whose life became more of a responsibility-free 24-hour party after he got married.
Having a good time? Well, here's that man again. Ammunition? Very welcome. Eyeballs and cocktails, the long and short of it. That's the fun. The punster should be punished. For tomorrow may bring sorrow, so tonight let us be gay.
Likewise, Nora looks at Nick with an impression that constantly implies harps, cupids, etc., but she's also clearly here mainly because he's fun. The implication, obviously, is that growing up as an heiress has left her with a boundless appetite for indulging the excesses of the naughtier parts of life for kicks, and she openly relishes how being with a man like Nick means bumping up against the world of drunks, wild parties, and the seedy criminal element of his former life. She's got the money, but he knows how to spend it. It's a match made in heaven.
Nice guy. Stepped me up the river one time. Hi, Nick.
Hello, face.
Long time I no see.
Long time.
Want to talk to Ma.
So you think you're a fighter, eh?
So what?
So listen, wife.
Oh, Nicky, I love you because you know such lovely people.
Also, even if we're already in 1934 doing the Hays Code coy separate beds thing, the sexual tension is constantly palpable, especially in the way Nora goads Nick into unretiring to solve the Wynant case. Sure, she says she's concerned about poor little worried Dorothy, but it's pretty clear that having cops and gangsters and gunmen bursting into their apartment at night and would-be killers hiding out in their rooms and seeing her husband in the badass lawman mode she'd previously only heard about is really doing it for her.
Well, it sounds like a good case. Girl mysteriously murdered. Nobody knows who did it. They haven't found any clues. No gun, no fingerprints.
I'll bet you dollars to dog biscuits that they never thought of.
Hey, all right? Maybe.
You darn fool, you didn't have to knock me out. I knew you'd take him, but I wanted to see you do it.
There's a girl with hair in her chest.
I mean, if only actual monogamy were this much fun, right? Like, you almost want to dislike these two people given their entire shtick is treating the world around them and everything, including other people's life or death problems, like a giant open-ended game of make-believe they can pop in and out of whenever it suits them because they're always exactly drunk enough to be morally okay with that and rich enough to get away with it. I mean, when Nick eventually decides to solve the crime, his investigation amounts to shaking down one witness, poking around to find a body, figuring out whose body it is based on key information he declines to share, and instead of just telling everyone he solved the case this immediately, his solution is to invite everyone involved to a staged fancy dinner party so he can play a mind game and trick the prime suspect into outing themselves basically for the fun of it.
You at the head.
And you on my right?
Thank you.
I'll put Macaulay here where he can help me. Ought to be a lady next to him. I've got Mimi.
I don't think Mima likes him.
Then it's Mimi.
Who goes next to me?
Suppose you leave that open, see what you draw.
All right.
Yeah, sorry folks, I've more or less known what happened to your missing loved one for a while now, but the wife just really gets into it when I do this stuff, and we didn't have anything to do for fun tonight, so yeah. But they're both so goddamn charming, you end up rooting for them anyway.
But Nicky, he might have killed you.
Well, what's the matter? You sorry he didn't?
Oh, I'm glad you're not a detective.
The movie was shot for very little money in a marathon 2-week, yes, week shoot at MGM by director Woodbridge Strong Van Dyke, who also did Trader Horn, San Francisco, the first Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movie, and then did almost all the sequels to this. Nicknamed One Take Woody for his fast, economical shooting style and ability to handle almost every genre with relative ease, he was equally admired by producers for bringing films in on time and under budget, and by actors for encouraging ad-libbing and improvisation when the freed-up scheduling time allowed for it. Jimmy Stewart, Eleanor Powell, Margaret O'Brien, and Nelson Eddy all credited him with discovering them as stars, and he was beloved in the industry for his generosity in helping older, out-of-work veterans of the silent era by giving them work as extras and crew to help them in hard times. Raised as a devout Christian Scientist who eschewed most modern medicine, he took his own life at only 53, following a long and painful struggle with cancer and heart disease mere days after finishing his final film. In setting up The Thin Man as an adaptation, Van Dyke had instructed the husband and wife screenwriting team of Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich to pay only nominal attention to the mystery storyline, which could be finessed into shape in editing and post-production, and instead concentrate most of their energy on making the interplay between Nick and Nora as engaging as possible, a gambit that obviously paid off. He also reputedly had to fight a bit to get the studio to cast Powell and Lloyd as the leads, having worked with the pair a few months earlier on Manhattan Melodrama, yes, the movie Dillinger got shot in front of, and figuring they'd be perfect for the roles. And again, the man had good instincts. The Thin Man is not a technical, visual, or narrative tour de force, it's a singular showcase for how much fun Nick and Nora have being Nick and Nora. The only thing these two enjoy more than each other is... yeah, okay, so let's talk about that.
How many drinks have you had?
This will make 6 martinis.
All right. Will you bring me 5 more martinis? Leo, line them right up here.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the idea of pushing me?
Oh, waiter. Drinks, please.
Into the kitchen, son, and thaw out some ice.
Grandma, what large glasses you have.
Say, listen, is he working on a case?
Yes,
What
yes.
case?
A case of scotch. Pitch in and help him.
Nora, stick me that bottle, will you?
What knocked her out?
I did. She was on the line of fire. Did somebody call a doctor, will you? Here, baby.
Well, can't you tell us anything about the case?
Yes, it's putting me way behind in my drinking.
Come on, let's get this in.
Alright, so the pink elephant in the room of this movie is that it's impossible to watch The Thin Man or the first few sequels today and not notice that the main characters are drinking a shocking amount of hard alcohol, mostly vodka, mostly in the form of Nick's beloved martinis, and that the movie doesn't so much not acknowledge this as celebrate it to an almost preposterously cavalier degree. I mean, to put it all on the table, Nick definitely and Nora probably are basically alcoholics. They've got a serious problem. And the movie knows this and thinks it's cute. And yeah, to some folks now, that can make these sort of an odd watch. Not as odd as some other films from back when, but a thing all the same. Especially if you happen to be watching these from the perspective of a life experience that might say, hey, codependent, mutually enabling addicts who get by because they've got money and or status are not actually anywhere near this adorable when you meet them for real, and that's a pretty reasonable prism of contrary perspective to take. That being said, there is a contextual reason for why The Thin Man plays Nick and Nora's indulgences the way it does. Hammett's original book, published a year earlier in 1933, first in Red Book, then on its own in expanded fashion, is a much darker and more sordid affair and takes place with the American Prohibition laws still very much in place. So the Charleses and everyone else doing their drinking on the down low, and it's all much more of a seedy atmosphere in that context. But by the time the film came out, Prohibition had been officially repealed, and hey, we can drink again had become one of America's favorite new methods of escaping the constant pain and horror of the ongoing Great Depression.
See, the important thing is the rhythm. You must always have rhythm in your shaking. Now, in Manhattan, you shake to foxtrot time. A Bronx to two-step time. The dry martini, you always shake to waltz time.
In addition, it's worth remembering that one of the less remarked upon unintended consequences of the Prohibition era was that it set the understanding of alcoholism and addiction as legitimate medical issues back decades because what research had existed had become co-opted and conflated with reactionary pseudoscience used to demonize alcohol as a whole. So for a long time after Prohibition was repealed, not only did nobody want to hear anything about alcohol being bad for you, wish fulfillment fantasies like Nick and Nora being able to knock back 5 martini lunches and only become more erudite, sophisticated, fun to be around, and brilliant at crime solving were very much in demand by by a national psyche that wanted to raise a fist and a glass in the face of what was seen as a failed experiment in moralistic self-righteousness that had only really served to devastate urban communities and give rise to organized crime. So there was at least an understandable and even sympathetic reason why the public was so enamored of, and Hollywood so eager to supply, a fantasy of the return of binge drinking as a fun-loving, consequence-free, joyful, grown-up pastime.
Ammunition? Come on, stock up.
Now, let this one ride.
You better. Hard times may get you.
Nick, who are these amazing people?
Oh, just a lot of old friends. Romans, countrymen, what do you say?
This is like old times, Nick. Remember the fun we used to have when we were both flat broke?
Oh, don't I?
Those were the good old days.
Don't kid yourself. These are the good old days.
Hey, Nick, I think your wife is great.
Thanks. I want you to see her.
Not that The Thin Man ever really stops to think about anything that grim or moody. It's a film that's bound and determined to never harsh your buzz. After all, if the two people solving the crime are really only here to have fun with it, why shouldn't you have fun with it too? And while in many respects not only related to the interesting interpretation of functional alcoholism, it's a bit dated, as is often the case with comedies of the 30s and 40s, it feels a lot more accessible and modern than many subsequent films of the 50s and 60s for a variety of reasons. But whether you see it as a slick, banter-driven distraction or relationship goals, the movie, The Thin Man, if you haven't seen it before, is something you should really track down. It's a real gem.
You weren't even there.
I know, but I saw him.
Where did you see him?
I was gazing in my crystal.
Waiter, will you serve the nuts? I mean, will you serve the guests the nuts?
Hey gang, here's a question that keeps coming up. If your handle is moviebob, where are your movie reviews? Well, my old reviews are in a lot of places. You'll find many of them on my YouTube channel, but you'll find the brand new ones on geek.com, an awesome site that's also your one-stop news source for science, TV, gaming, technology, nerd culture, the works. You can find all my reviews directly by going to geek.com/author/bchipman, because that's my real name, and you can get regular updates on all my reviews and all of geek.com's other great content by signing up for their kick-ass newsletter at subscribe.geek.com. And don't forget to also subscribe to the Geek.com YouTube channel, where you'll find the videos that accompany my reviews and tons of other great content too. Remember, that's Geek.com, the Geek.com newsletter, and Geek.com on YouTube. Make sure you don't miss out on all the latest MovieBob reviews. You can also check out my own new website, MovieBob Central, where you'll find my blog, links to all my work, and shop for my books, ebooks, and future MovieBob products. And please remember to like these videos, share them with all of your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching another MovieBob production.